Before we begin, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and write in the comments if you would ever spend a night at an abandoned summer camp in the woods, because tonight's story is about a place where people kept disappearing, where the lake stayed too still after dark, and where the sound of footsteps outside your cabin could mean you were already too late. It was called Crystal Lake Camp. Long before the police reports, the rumors, and the missing posters, it had been a normal place. Kids came there every summer. They swam in the lake, played games between the cabins, laughed around the fire, and believed the woods were just woods. But years later, the camp stood abandoned at the edge of a black, quiet lake, its cabins rotting in the trees, its docks half broken and sinking into the water, its name spoken only in whispers by locals who refused to go near it after sunset. Some said the camp was cursed. Some said something had happened there so terrible that the land itself never let go of it. Others said the lake kept what it took. And on one cold Friday evening in late autumn, 5 friends decided they were going there anyway. They were not children. They were college age, old enough to laugh at ghost stories, old enough to call themselves rational, old enough to believe that abandoned places are only dangerous if the floors collapse or the police catch you trespassing. Their names were Ryan, Mason, Chloe, Jenna, and Tyler. They drove out just before sunset in an old dark SUV, following a cracked road that disappeared deeper and deeper into the forest. Branches scraped the sides of the vehicle. The trees grew denser with every mile, and when the road finally opened, the camp appeared all at once between the trunks, like something pulled out of a nightmare that had been waiting for them to arrive. The main sign had fallen sideways, half rotten and covered in moss, but the words were still visible beneath the grime. Crystal Lake Camp. Beyond it stood a line of empty cabins with broken windows and sagging roofs. A rusted bell tower leaned slightly near the center clearing. Farther back, through the trees, the lake stretched out dark and perfectly still, reflecting the last gray light of evening like polished black glass. For a few seconds, none of them spoke. Then Tyler laughed and said it looked even better than the photos online. Mason grabbed a flashlight and jumped out first. Chloe followed, pulling her jacket tighter around herself as she looked toward the water. Jenna stayed by the SUV a second longer, staring at the cabins with a strange expression she didn't explain. Ryan, who had planned most of the trip, tried to keep the mood up, talking about getting some footage, checking the main lodge, maybe spending an hour by the lake before heading back, but even he lowered his voice without meaning to. The place had that effect. It made everything quieter. Even the wind seemed to move carefully there. They entered the camp through the old central clearing, their boots crunching over wet leaves and broken gravel. The cabins stood with their doors hanging crooked or shut tight with warped wood. The swing set near the far edge of the camp moved once in the breeze and gave off a rusty metallic groan that made everyone turn. No birds called, no insects buzzed. The forest around Crystal Lake felt too still, as if the whole place were listening. Tyler joked about how perfect the silence would sound in a horror movie trailer, but nobody laughed very hard. In the main lodge, they found overturned chairs, mold-blackened walls, old children's drawings pinned under layers of dirt, and a stone fireplace stuffed with dead leaves. A calendar still hung on the wall near the kitchen entrance, its pages curled with age. One date had been circled in red, though the ink had bled so badly that no one could tell what had once been written there. Ryan filmed everything with his phone, narrating in a half-joking voice at first, but that tone started fading the longer they stayed. Mason wandered toward the back office and came out holding a stack of old camp records tied with a rotten cord. Most of the papers dissolved when he touched them, but inside the stack was a photo, a group picture. Kids and counselors standing in front of the camp sign, smiling at the camera on a bright summer day. At first, it looked normal. Then Jenna noticed something. In the tree line behind the group, between two trunks, There was a tall, dark shape, too far away to see clearly, too thin to be one of the people in front. It looked like a person standing perfectly still, half hidden in the woods, watching the photo being taken. Tyler said it was probably just a stain or damage from age. Mason agreed too quickly. Chloe asked him to put it back. He didn't. He slid the picture into his jacket pocket and said they could check it later. That was when the first sound came from outside, a single wooden knock, not on the lodge door, somewhere farther off, like something hard striking one of the empty cabin walls. Everyone looked up, then silence again. Ryan said it was probably a branch. Mason nodded, but a few seconds later the knock came again, this time closer. One knock, then nothing. Jenna whispered that they should leave. Tyler rolled his eyes, but even he was watching the windows now. The evening light outside had dropped fast. The gray lake beyond the trees was almost black. Ryan tried to reset the mood by saying they should at least walk down to the dock before heading out. That was the original point of the trip, after all. Get some footage of the lake at dusk. Maybe see the old boats if any were still there. Nobody really wanted to say yes, but nobody wanted to be the first one to act scared either, so they went. The path to the water passed between the last row of cabins, where the trees grew thicker and the ground turned soft with years of fallen leaves. The dock came into view suddenly through the branches, long and weathered, stretching over the dark surface of Crystal Lake. One old canoe, cracked and half filled with rainwater, was tied at the side. The rope creaked as it drifted lightly against the wood. The lake itself was unbelievably still, smooth as glass except for faint rings spreading near the reeds at the far end. Chloe asked if anyone else smelled something strange. Not rot exactly. Wet wood, mud, old water. Something cold. Mason walked a few steps onto the dock and shined his flashlight across the lake. The beam cut a pale line over the water and caught nothing but mist beginning to form near the opposite shore. Tyler said they should take one group shot and get out. Ryan agreed. They stood near the edge of the dock, shoulder to shoulder, while he held the phone up in front of them. Just as the screen flashed, Jenna turned sharply toward the cabins behind them. She swore she had heard footsteps on the path, not animal movement. Footsteps, slow, heavy, coming through the leaves. They all stopped moving. For a few seconds there was nothing. Then, from somewhere behind the cabins, the old camp bell rang once, loud enough to cut across the lake and crash through the silence like a warning. None of them had touched it. None of them were near it. Yet the sound rolled across Crystal Lake Camp and seemed to hang in the cold evening air long after the bell itself stopped moving. And that was the moment they all understood the same thing without saying it out loud. They were not alone at Crystal Lake. The silence after the bell felt worse than the sound itself. The five of them remained frozen on the dock, staring back toward the dark line of cabins as the last vibration of the bell seemed to sink into the trees. No one joked now. No one smiled. Even Tyler, who had laughed at every strange thing since they arrived, looked pale in the weak light of Ryan's phone. The lake beside them stayed perfectly still, black and cold, as if nothing in the world had moved except that bell. Jenna was the first to speak, and when she did, her voice came out thin and tight. She said they needed to leave right now. No lodge, no more exploring, no more photos. Just get back to the SUV and go. Ryan nodded almost immediately. He wanted to keep pretending this was just nerves, just a bad atmosphere, just an old place messing with their heads, but the truth was becoming impossible to ignore. Places like that have a feeling when something is wrong, and Crystal Lake had started feeling wrong the moment the sun went down. They turned from the dock and headed back toward the cabins, moving much faster now, their flashlights and phone beams jerking over tree trunks and rotting walls. Wet leaves clung to their boots. Branches brushed their shoulders in the dark. The path that had seemed short before now felt too long, too narrow, too exposed. Every shadow between the cabins, looked like someone standing still and waiting. When they reached the clearing, they all saw it at once. The bell tower was still moving slightly, not enough to make the bell ring again, just a slow side-to-side sway, as if something had touched it moments earlier and stepped away before they returned. The rope hanging beneath it moved too, brushing lightly against the wooden frame. Mason shined his flashlight toward the base of the tower. The beam caught mud, weeds, broken boards, and then something else. Footprints, large, deep, fresh in the wet ground. Not many, just enough to show someone had stood there very recently. Jenna whispered that this was not funny anymore. Tyler said nothing. Chloe reached for Ryan's arm without taking her eyes off the bell tower. Ryan aimed his light toward the cabins and told everyone to keep moving. Their SUV was just beyond the far edge of the clearing, where they had parked beside the broken entrance sign. Another minute, and they would be out. Another minute, and the forest would be behind them. But as they crossed between the central cabins, Mason suddenly stopped. Cabin 6, the one nearest the old bathhouse, had light inside, faint, yellowish, flickering through the cracked curtain of the front window. All 5 of them stared at it. That cabin had been dark when they walked past earlier. They all knew it. Ryan swore under his breath and told everyone to ignore it. Just keep going. But Mason stepped closer instead, his flashlight shaking slightly in his hand. He said maybe someone else was there, maybe a squatter, maybe a caretaker. Maybe this whole thing had some normal explanation after all. Chloe grabbed his sleeve and told him to stop. He pulled free. The light inside cabin 6 flickered again, brightened for a second, then dimmed as if someone had just passed in front of it. Tyler muttered that if there really was someone in the camp, then maybe they were the ones ringing the bell and creeping around. Ryan snapped back that they could figure it out from the car, not by standing in the middle of the clearing like idiots. That should have ended it. It didn't, because at that exact moment, the cabin door creaked open by itself, slowly, just wide enough to show a slice of darkness inside. The light was gone now, only blackness beyond the doorway. For a second, nobody moved. The entire camp felt like it was holding its breath. Then from somewhere deeper inside, cabin 6, came a wet, dragging sound across the floorboards, slow, heavy, like something being pulled. Mason backed away so fast he nearly slipped. Jenna made a choking sound in her throat. Ryan shouted for everyone to run. They did. Boots pounded over wet gravel and leaves as the 5 of them bolted across the clearing toward the entrance road. The cabins blurred past on both sides. Flashlights bounced wildly over walls and broken windows. Chloe was crying now. Tyler kept looking back over his shoulder. Ryan heard another sound behind them, not from cabin 6 this time, but from somewhere between the cabins to their left. Footsteps, heavy, fast enough to keep pace. He risked one glance and saw nothing but black space between the buildings, yet he knew with absolute certainty that something was moving there. The SUV came into view through the trees. Relief hit all of them at once, so hard it almost felt painful. Ryan fumbled for the keys in his pocket, while Mason yanked at the passenger side door handle. Jenna was halfway inside before the others reached the car. Chloe climbed into the back. Tyler grabbed the rear door. Ryan hit the unlock button, threw himself into the driver's seat, and jammed the key into the ignition. Nothing. The engine clicked once and died. He tried again. Another dead click. The headlights flickered weakly across the entrance sign and the trees beyond it, then went dim. Mason shouted at him to keep trying. Ryan turned the key again, harder this time, like force alone could wake the engine. The dashboard lit, sputtered, and then everything went black. Total silence. No engine, no lights, no music, nothing. For a second, the only sound was all of them breathing too fast in the dark car. Then came 3 slow knocks on the rear of the SUV. 1, 2, 3. Not loud, not frantic, just firm enough to be deliberate. Nobody moved. Nobody even turned around at first. Tyler was the one who finally looked through the rear window. His face changed instantly. He didn't scream. That was almost worse. He just made a tiny sound, like all the air had left his lungs at once. Ryan turned too. There was someone standing behind the SUV. Tall, broad, motionless. Too dark to make out clearly in the night, but close enough that the outline was impossible to mistake. The figure's head looked wrong somehow, bulky and pale in places, as if part of the face had been covered or damaged. One arm hung at its side. The other was raised slightly, resting against the back of the vehicle where the knocks had come from. It did not wave. It did not rush them. It just stood there, staring into the car through the rear glass. Jenna started sobbing. Chloe covered her mouth with both hands. Mason grabbed at the door handle on his side and shouted that they had to get out and run through the woods. Ryan yelled back that splitting up out there would get them killed. Tyler kept staring through the rear window, unable to look away. Then the figure moved. Not fast. One step to the side, then another, slow enough to let them see it was not an illusion, not a tree, not a shadow, a real person, or something close enough to one. It passed out of view behind the SUV. Ryan forced himself to breathe and whispered for everyone to lock their doors. Clicks answered around the cabin. Too late. From outside the driver's side window came the sound of wet boots stopping beside the car. Ryan didn't move. None of them did. The sound beside the driver's side door was close enough that it no longer felt like something outside the car. It felt inside their chests, pressing against their ribs. Wet boots on gravel. One slow step, then stillness. The entire SUV seemed to shrink around them. Jenna was crying openly now, shaking so hard the seat beneath her trembled. Chloe had both hands over her mouth, trying to keep any sound from escaping. Mason's face was pale and slick with sweat. His hands still locked around the door handle, even though he knew opening it would be suicide. Tyler stared straight ahead, frozen, like if he didn't move, maybe whatever stood outside would forget he was there. Ryan's hand was still on the dead ignition key. His mind kept insisting this had to be a person, a man, a trespasser, some sick local trying to scare them. Because if it wasn't human, then nothing in the world made sense anymore. Then came the scrape. Something hard dragged slowly across the driver's side window from back to front. Not enough pressure to shatter the glass, just enough to leave a long, horrible sound behind. Ryan turned his head inch by inch. On the other side of the window was a face, or what had once been one. Most of it was hidden by a cracked, filthy white mask with dark holes where the eyes should have been. Wet strands of moss or lake weeds clung to one side of it. The exposed skin around the edges looked gray in the darkness, swollen and wrong, as if water had held it too long. Behind the black eye holes, nothing could be seen, but all 5 of them felt the same thing in that moment. It was looking directly at Ryan. The figure tilted its head slightly, then lifted one hand and placed it flat against the glass. The fingers were huge. Mud was packed beneath the nails. Water dripped from the sleeve. Jenna screamed. The figure moved instantly. The hand slammed against the window hard enough to rock the SUV. Mason shouted. Chloe ducked down. Tyler kicked at the back of Ryan's seat in blind panic. Ryan did the only thing he could think of. He grabbed the flashlight from the center console, threw open his door with all his weight, and crashed into the figure before his own fear could stop him. The impact sent both of them sideways into the wet gravel. The flashlight flew from his hand. For one split second, Ryan saw the figure up close beneath the swinging branches, and the weak spill of moonlight breaking through the clouds. Bigger than any man he knew, heavy, silent. The mask split across one cheek, the jacket dark with water and rot. It smelled like mud, old wood, and something pulled from the bottom of the lake. Ryan scrambled backward, expecting the figure to fall, to grunt, to react like a normal person. It didn't. It just turned toward him again, as if being hit meant nothing at all. Mason threw open the passenger door and shouted for everyone to run. That shattered whatever frozen instinct remained. They exploded out of the SUV in different directions. Jenna and Chloe bolted toward the cabins. Mason ran after them. Tyler sprinted toward the bell tower. Ryan got to his feet and ran for the main lodge because it was the only building large enough to have another exit, another weapon, another chance. Behind him he heard footsteps, slow at first, then faster, not running wildly, walking with certainty, the kind of steps that already know where you're going before you do. Ryan didn't look back again. He crashed through the lodge door and slammed it shut behind him, dropping the wooden bar he found near the entrance into place with shaking hands. The old room swallowed him in darkness and dust, broken chairs, the stone fireplace, rotting tables, moonlight slicing through cracked windows. His breath came in ragged bursts. Somewhere outside, someone hit the door once. The whole frame shuddered. Then silence. Ryan stumbled backward through the lodge, calling Mason's name, then Chloe's, then anyone's. No answer. Only the lake wind moving through holes in the walls. He found the kitchen, broken shelves, rusted sinks, a butcher knife lying on the floor beneath a fallen cabinet. He grabbed it with numb fingers. Another impact hit the lodge door, then another. Wood splintered. Ryan turned and ran for the back hallway. He passed the office where they had found the old photo. The picture frame on the floor now lay face up, though no one had left it there. The tall, dark shape in the tree line seemed closer somehow. Or maybe his mind was breaking. He didn't stop to look again. In the rear hallway he found old counselor rooms and one door hanging half open to the basement stairs. From below came a damp, cold smell and something else. Breathing. Not loud. Close. Ryan backed away from the stairs just as the front lodge door finally gave way with a crack that echoed through the whole building. He heard slow footsteps entering the lodge. 1, 2, 3. No rush, no shouting, just patient movement through the darkness. Ryan ducked into one of the counselor rooms and pressed himself behind the broken door, knife in hand, trying not to breathe. The footsteps moved through the lobby, then through the kitchen. A chair scraped. Glass crunched under a boot. Then silence again. He waited so long his legs started shaking uncontrollably. Somewhere outside, the camp bell rang once more. Then a scream cut through the night. Chloe. Ryan knew it was her instantly. He burst from the room before fear could stop him and ran back through the lodge, out the shattered front entrance, and into the clearing. Rain had started again, thin and cold. The cabin stood black against the trees. The bell tower swayed slowly. Near the center of the clearing, Mason was on the ground, trying to crawl backward through the mud, one leg bent wrong beneath him. 10 feet away, Chloe lay motionless beside the old fire pit. Jenna was nowhere in sight. Tyler was hanging halfway out of the bell tower ladder, screaming for help, while below him the masked figure stood looking up, as if deciding whether to bother climbing. Ryan shouted and ran straight at it with the knife. The figure turned. Even through the rain and darkness, the black holes of the mask found him instantly. Ryan drove the knife forward with everything he had. The blade went into the figure's side. He felt it, felt the resistance, felt it sink deep. The figure barely reacted. One huge hand closed around Ryan's wrist. The pressure was unreal, like being caught in machinery. Ryan screamed and dropped the knife. The other hand hit him across the chest and threw him hard enough to send him sliding through wet leaves beside the fire pit. Pain exploded through his ribs. By the time he forced himself upright, the figure had already turned away from him, as if he wasn't worth finishing yet. Tyler lost his grip above and dropped from the bell tower, hitting the mud badly. Before he could rise, the figure reached him. Ryan heard the sound before he understood what he was seeing. A short, brutal impact. Then Tyler stopped moving. Mason tried to drag himself away, clawing at the mud. The figure stepped past him, then paused. For 1 second, Ryan thought maybe it was over. Then the masked head tilted toward the lake, Something was moving there, a flashlight beam, weak and jerking through the trees near the dock. Jenna. She had made it farther than the others. The figure left Mason alive in the mud and started toward the shoreline. Ryan forced himself to his feet, grabbed the fallen flashlight from the ground, and stumbled after it. The path to the dock was slick with rain and black under the trees. Ahead, Jenna reached the end of the weathered boards and turned with nowhere else to go but the water. She was screaming now, begging, not even sure for what. The figure walked onto the dock without hesitation. Ryan shouted her name and ran harder, every rib feeling broken. Jenna stepped back too fast, slipped on the soaked wood, and fell into the lake. The splash shattered the still surface. Ryan reached the start of the dock just as the figure stopped at its center and looked down into the black water. For a second, everything held still again. Rain, mist, the outline of the masked man above the lake. Then Jenna surfaced once, arms thrashing, mouth open in a scream. A pale hand shot up from beneath the water and seized the edge of the dock beside the figure. Ryan froze. It was not Jenna's hand. It was smaller, gray, water-swollen, childlike. Another hand followed, then another shape rising just below the surface, too distorted by dark water to fully see. The figure on the dock did not move away from it. It stood as if it belonged there, as if the lake itself had called it back. Jenna disappeared under before Ryan could reach her. The water closed over her without another sound. The figure slowly turned its masked face toward Ryan one last time, and in that moment, Ryan understood something he would never be able to explain to anyone who hadn't seen it. Crystal Lake was not just hiding a killer. It was keeping something, feeding something, calling people back to it year after year until the camp rotted and the stories turned into warnings no one believed. Ryan ran. He didn't decide to. His body made the choice for him. He turned from the dock and fled through the trees, through rain and branches and darkness, not stopping when he heard movement behind him, not stopping when the bell rang again in the distance, not stopping until the road appeared and headlights cut across him from the highway beyond the forest. They found him hours later, stumbling barefoot through the rain, covered in mud, blood, and lake water that was not all his own. When the police searched Crystal Lake Camp the next morning, they found the SUV, the broken lodge door, signs of violence in the clearing, and one body near the bell tower. Tyler. Mason was discovered alive but barely conscious beside the fire pit, unable to explain what he had seen without breaking down. Chloe and Jenna were never officially recovered. The dock had blood on it. The lake gave nothing back. As for Ryan, he told the police everything. The bell, the cabins, the mask, the thing beneath the water. They blamed shock, trauma, darkness, fear. They said abandoned camps make people imagine things. That someone in a mask had attacked them. That the rest was panic and grief twisting memory into nightmare. But Ryan knew what he saw on that dock. And years later, when Crystal Lake Camp was finally scheduled for demolition, the workers sent to tear down the last cabins refused to stay after sunset. They reported hearing the bell ring by itself from the clearing. They reported footsteps moving cabin to cabin in the rain. And one man swore that when he looked across the lake at dusk, he saw a tall figure standing motionless at the far shore, with something pale just beneath the water beside it. So if you ever hear about an abandoned summer camp near a lake that looks too still, too quiet, too dead after dark, don't tell yourself it's just an old story, because some places do not forget what happened there, and some lakes never stop waiting.